I'm going to call the meeting to
Sorry about
order at 5:07. I'm City Manager Steve Wilkie, and I will be the temporary president of the Public Works Board tonight because this is an organizational meeting of August 11th, 2020. I will preside over the meeting until such time as the board elects its president. I want to introduce two new members, although one is a historic member, and that's John Reich, who is the town board rep and had been on before and has been reappointed. And then Greg Polachek, who is the new member who we've been waiting to see, and he is probably going to appear as S. Wilkie at CI. So I've gotten better looking. Anyways, roll call, Betsy.
Ms. Schmidt,
Here.
Mr. Temperley,
Here.
Mr. Pickard,
Here.
Mr. Lehrer,
Here.
Mr. Polachek,
Here.
Mr. Reich,
Here.
all present.
Thank you, Betsy. The Public Works Board rules use Robert's Rules of Order for nominations. I will take nominations for board president from the floor and will continue to take nominations until such time as nominations are closed. At this point, at the point where the nominations are closed, the board can vote by roll call for a candidate, and the candidate with the lowest total will be eliminated, and this will continue until one candidate has a majority of the board. The board could choose to vote by ballot until one candidate receives a majority. Does the board have a preference? Historically, we've just done it by roll call vote, so if that's okay with everybody, we'll do it that way.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Yep.
And historically, we've had one person nominated and then the nominations closed and a unanimous vote cast. It does not have to go that way, but that's the way it's been done historically. So I open the floor for nominations for Public Works Board President. Are there any nominations?
Is there anybody that would like to be nominated? Don't everybody raise your hand at once, right?
Usually Mark drafts somebody, so.
Who's our vice president the past year?
I was president. Usually we rotate. So it's either you or Mark. You got the most experience.
I would like to nominate Mark then.
All right.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? I will entertain a motion to close the nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Mark Pickard as Public Works Board President.
I'll make that motion.
Todd Temperley has moved. Vicky, are you seconding?
Second.
You have that, Betsy?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Aye.
Okay. It looks like Mark Pickard is our new Public Works Board President for the next year.
All right.
And I turn this meeting over to you, Mark.
Thank you. I thought maybe it was my turn, so I'm not surprised. Unlike previous years, we don't have to move chairs, move seats, though.
That's right.
So let's do this same procedure. Opening the entertaining motions for vice president.
For this one, Todd, I'd like to nominate you for this one.
All right.
So I'll nominate Todd Temperley as vice president.
Is there a
Second.
Okay, Ian motions and Vicky seconds. Any other motions or any other nominations for vice president? Seeing none, hearing none, close nominations and take a roll call vote for Todd Temperley as vice president.
Do we need a motion to close the
Yeah, I make
nominations?
yeah,
Do we?
I'll make the motion to close the nominations for vice president.
I'll second.
Second.
All right. Now we can do the roll call vote, right?
You want a roll call vote?
Yes, he would like a roll call vote, Betsy, and I think what we're doing here is we'll do the roll call vote to close the nominations and unanimously elect Todd Temperley, council or Public Works Board Vice President. If that's agreeable
Okay.
with everybody?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Mr. Pickard,
Aye.
Mr. Lair,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Mr. Reich,
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Very good. Next then on the agenda is number 5, correction and or approval of the minutes of March 10th, 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from March 10th.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes stand approved. Next item on the agenda, questions and public comment. I can't see very well in the city council chamber, but I assume there's nobody there to make public comment. Nope.
That's correct. It doesn't appear so. No.
All right. Moving on then to item 7, discussion recommendation on wireless communications facilities in the right-of-way, 5G, small cell, wireless, etc. ordinance. So anything to say on this, Steve, or anybody else?
I think Dan is the one that put it together and probably should start the conversation, and then maybe Dwayne and I'll add to it.
All right, let's have a motion first, just because that's what we really should do, is if anybody would like to make a initial motion to approve or not.
I'll make a motion to approve motion 20-8-1.
Is there a second? Say that again.
I'll second.
All right. Todd motions and Ian
Who
seconds.
seconded?
Ian,
Sorry, who seconded?
That was Ian. Todd for the first and Ian for the second.
Got it.
Open up to presentation then?
yes.
Okay. So this is in response to state statute. You received a bulk of materials on this particular topic item. We're a little bit behind the game here, but we're going through the process of street permitting in the right of way and other permitting, and this does fit. You received the memo from Anita Gallucci, MEUW attorney, and then the draft kind of uniform ordinance that was prepared on behalf of MEUW for member municipalities for review and consideration. I tailored that for the city of Lake Mills. No big comprehensive substantive changes to the ordinance itself. I did add reasonable language in certain areas and then just basically added identifying information. So what do you guys want to know about this? Everyone's familiar with what 5G is, right? 5th generation. Every cell phone service provider is basically moving to this. It's uses broadband technology from what I understand. We are required as a municipality to basically share our utility poles with entities that would like space. We can put forth reasonable rules with regard to the usage of those, and all of this is identified in the state statute that was provided. That's commonly known as the small wireless statute. It's relatively newly adopted by the state of Wisconsin, 2019, I believe. I think it was June. From there, this is something that is happening as a smaller municipality along the corridor of I-94. It's gearing up to address Lake Mills basically as we speak. So this ordinance is looking at 5G, but also a little bit broader with regard to general connections to our utility poles and use of such poles in the right of way. I guess what I'd like to do is ask if there are questions or what concerns there would be. These documents were prepared by MEUW. The City of Lake Mills is a member, and it's basically a uniform ordinance that they've recommended adopting.
The only question I think I have, and I think I know the answer, it was brought up when we were originally talking about doing sub-metering and putting in additional wireless network and infrastructure. There was, I think, only one person that mentioned about radiation and that whole portion. I just want to at least make sure the question's asked. Are there any other health concerns by doing that?
That really isn't my area of expertise. I've read reports and I'm kind of familiar with the concerns that have been addressed. I'm not a scientist. I'm not aware of anything that is proven or with regard to case studies at this point. I've seen resounding no's to the conspiracies out there that 5G is contributing to the coronavirus that went through right now. But with regard to radiation, my understanding is that they do, in fact, emit a signal. I'm not aware of any health incidences or reports effects that 5G specifically has. So I'm going to kind of avoid answering that question.
Wise choice. I just need to make sure I asked the question, and I thought that was an appropriate answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we charge them for that, or do they just get a spot in our poll? How does the maintenance
Yeah,
work?
we do. The city of Lake Mills, where we haven't been engaging in charges for utility pole usage for a while, although it's completely appropriate and actually required by statute. We are allowed to charge reasonable rates is the language that is used.
And we do charge the cable TV and the telephone company currently for using the poles.
We
correct?
should be charging for everything. There has been a little bit of a lag, and we're trying to correct that as we speak.
Good.
There was a point in time when the laws were different, and there was a decision made that the number of poles that we had to pay for versus the number of poles they had to pay for were so close in the amount that it was a zero revenue change. We would have to pay them, and they would have to pay us. So
Because
it was,
not all the poles were ours at that point in time. We
That's
were on
right.
some people's poles.
a lot of were Verizon and a lot were Charter and some were WE. And so there was a general consensus that there wasn't going to be a lot of money changing hands in relationship to pole attachments. The new law requires us to pay that and vice versa, that they have to pay it and they have to prove that they're paying it. So they've become much more aggressive in trying to find out how many pole attachments they have in the city of Lake Mills. And as you know, we've been putting a lot of our utilities underground. So the amount of pole attachments has dropped substantially. So it's trying to keep up with how many poles have come and how many poles have gone and how many are theirs, how many of ours. And so it's just, we're trying to work through that numbers game.
So is this new technology replacing cell towers? Because years ago, there was one proposed in the south side of town. And I think we even allowed the water tower to be used.
We set it up so that the water tower could be used. There has never actually been anyone that went on it. That was because the location to the existing towers didn't match up well. They did put one on the south side of town, so if you go down by the old cement factory down there, on that hill above there, there is a cell tower.
Oh, okay.
We also did one here on the city property, so we have a lease that has been renewed annually by a company that develops cell towers. They haven't built it, but we've been getting a lot of interest in it recently. And they continue to pay their lease. So right now, I don't know if there's going to be a substantial change. The way that 5G works is it's a very important in autonomous cars. And so they're going to, my impression is that there are going to be a lot of these mini towers in the right of ways to help with controlling all the information coming out of cars nowadays. So that's probably what's driving a lot of this information, because essentially what they're doing is putting mini towers every so far on our poles. And I think that they have a right to put up their own poles if we don't have poles there.
I believe that's accurate as well. If there isn't a municipally owned utility pole, then this would give them permission, the ability to put a pole in the right of way if necessary. I don't think that's something that we're going to face because I think there's adequate coverage. But that will remain to be seen.
Well, South Main Street has got a pretty long strip where there are no power poles.
Where everything went underground, correct?
That's correct. And there are no alternate routes. It's not like CP Avenue goes through or Ferry Drive goes through. So the situation is that they're probably going to be putting up independent poles in the right of way because those streetlights aren't going to be able to handle the additional weight that would be required. And I don't know that they would have the power requirements or the connection requirements necessary for what they need.
So any additional poles will also require electricity, and we should think about how those should be allowed, how they should be charged, cost for as well, moving forward.
I think that's all in agreements already or covered by the ordinance. They don't get electricity for free, so it would be metered. That's a requirement of the law. If they put up their own pole, it's at their own cost. We have some ability to tell them where we think they can go, but not a lot. So this has pretty much all been hammered out legislatively. We kind of get to put together an ordinance that says we're going to charge you and this is how we're going to function, and that's about it.
So the state's already decided that we need this, right? I mean, if somebody is upset about this and wants the city to push back, we would lose, right?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that the way that the state looks at it is we're a creature of the state, and if they don't like us, they just get rid of us.
Right. But we need some sort of rules in progress, so at least we're not getting crushed by it. So
Right. We need something that gives us some direction.
yeah.
And this ordinance covers more than just 5G. It covers any kind of wireless type of service, right?
Yeah.
Is there a common distance between mini towers? Is there a common distance between mini towers?
I don't know
I
if
do
anybody
not know.
knows.
I don't think that they've actually come up with a decision on what the distance should be. It's going to vary depending on the amount of trees and the topography and those types of things. So I believe that in relatively flat spots, you probably see them pretty far apart.
Right.
But, let's take South Main Street. It rises. and then it's got a crest, and then it drops down a little bit. You may see them closer together in certain areas there. Right now, the trees are kind of thinned out. In a couple of years, as the trees come back, you may see them adding more into there because the trees always interfere with the towers.
So to kind of piggyback off what Todd was talking about, really the bulk of it says, here's the ordinance that we're doing, which basically just says we're going to put together a rate structure at some point, but it really just is the framework behind it. And it's about
That's correct. This ordinance does not provide, $5 per connection or something like that. All of it is reasonableness language. So some entity, the council has to set what the actual rates will be.
And we don't like doing that by ordinance. We prefer to do it by resolution, because then we don't have to amend an ordinance every year. We just can pass a new resolution on an annual basis or whenever we decide to amend the fees.
And then that cost, is it presented to the Public Works Board first and then to council, or are you guys taking this straight to council?
This one is a Public Works Board first type of deal, based on the way the Public Works Board rules read, but it does go to council.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I don't have any.
Hearing no further discussion, we have a motion and second to approve this, using the prepared motion. Okay.
So just, if we can, just for one more second to answer Mr. Polachek's question, I did a little bit of Google research, and it looks like it's about 500 meters for the range from a tower. So I don't know how reliable that is, but that would give you some sense of how many towers are going to be necessary to cover Lake Mills.
Thank you.
Okay. If nothing else, then let's have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Lair,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, next on the agenda is item 8, discussion recommendation on capital improvement plan 2021 budget. And
I'll make a motion to approve motion 20-8-2.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion second. Discussion. Steve, do you want to start us out?
I'm going to start out on the summary page. Pretty consistent with what we looked at over the last several years. Slight change at the end at 26, it's Franklin Scott Street, was the new addition. But otherwise, West Lake Street, which had been delayed 1 year, is now back on. That's from Main Street to Ferry. It'll probably include some stormwater drainage that runs a little bit further. That's something that Brandon's going to have to determine for us. There's currently almost virtually no stormwater drainage on that street. There's a little bit at Church, and there's a little bit over by Ferry, but otherwise there's not a lot. The one at Ferry drains to the lake, and the one at Church and Lake drains to the mill pond. So I'm sure Brandon's going to have to spend some time figuring out how we're going to divide that up. Try and keep most of it going to the mill pond, but have to look at how it breaks and what the conditions are there. It is a total rebuild, so it's new base, new curb and gutter, new pavement, new sidewalks, new storm sewer, new water, new sewer, new electric. So if you look at it, each one of the departments has a cost assigned to it for each one of the net projects over the next 5 years. And they have some in the year prior, depending on design. So like Brandon has already started doing the survey work on West Lake Street and Reed Street. Reed Street is a relatively small project, but it has similar issues to West Lake Street. First of all, it's got, I think West Lake Street has 9 lead lateral services and Reed Street has 5. The sanitary sewer and water mains are over 100 years old, probably 110 years old. The sanitary sewer in Reed Street is eating Reed Street, so you might find a hole in it every once in a while. It's also got a pretty good sag in it, so it's moved itself up the list. West Lake Street is under the same condition, one of the oldest water mains in the city, obviously coming out of the old CPN site or Fargo site where the wells were originally located. The water main on Lake Street is very old.
Steve, John Reich with a question.
Sure.
Could you kind of state generally what kind of projects are on this capital sheet versus what projects would not be on the sheet from a public works point of view?
Yeah, I've kind of been going over them a little bit, but what drives the list is probably is closely related to the DNR order that we have to replace 7% of the lead lateral services each year. In the last 2 years, we've replaced 130 some. So we have a bank built up, but we are required to replace about 18 a year. And so like next year, we're looking at 14. The year after, we're probably looking at about 15. It'll probably drop down to about 8 or 9. We're going to get to the point at some point where we're going to have to look at doing North Main Street. But that'll be another debate that we get to have. Another thing is age of the infrastructure. So if you looked at West Lake Street, it's probably a 1 or a 2 on the PACER rating, which means that it's as, well, 3. So it's about as poor as it can get. And then you look at sanitary sewers, 110 years old, the water main's 110 years old. And normally those pieces of infrastructure are replaced somewhere between 40 and 70 years. So we've gotten our life expectancy out of those. And we also have a significant amount of water loss. So we generally consider the older infrastructure to be contributing to water loss, inflow and infiltration. So water loss would be in the water system. Inflow and infiltration would be in the sanitary sewer system. So we start to weigh and balance all those issues and consider why we would be replacing those. So, you know, we kind of end up in a debate on the maintenance versus rebuild. So like last year, we did a mill and overlay on Grove Street. We looked at that and said that water main was 60 and sanitary sewer were 60 years old. So they're close to, well, they're in the normal replacement schedule for a water main and sewer in the standard replacement processes. But in the city of Lake Mills, that's a relatively new system. So if you've got something that was built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you're probably in a relatively new category. So even though most cities would be looking at replacing it, we really didn't start replacing water and sewer mains until, what, 94? And this Public Works Board has been doing a pretty good job of staying on top of those replacements. But it also falls into revenue. Last 2 years, we've replaced almost 2 miles of water and sewer on Mulberry and South Main Street. And those costs are into the $4 million range. And that's debt that we borrow, and then we have to pay that back. And so the rates have to cover that. So, like last year, sewer has done relatively well and has the ability to pay their debt. Water, that hasn't been the case. They had to have a significant water rate last year increase that went into effect this July. Those are the kinds of things that we weigh and balance: is how much money do we have? How old is the infrastructure? What condition is the roadway in? What are the replacement needs? So we've been balancing back and forth on some issues, and
I guess the question isn't asking about any specific project, but more like for instance, I see on the under the water project, there's a Reed Street, $84,000 this year for Reed Street. And I know some people who live on Reed Street, they had a water main break a couple of weeks ago. And there was overnight repairs. They were without water for a day while that was being repaired. Is that the project that is showing here as a line item, or is that different?
no, I think that's different.
Okay, so repair projects like that, that's not on a capital budget, correct? This is new or replacement work you're talking about here.
That's correct. We track water main breaks, and we generally see between 20 and 30 water main breaks a year.
Maybe a little less lately.
Yeah, lately.
Yeah.
We had a relatively mild winter that contributed to it. The harder the winter is, the worse it is. But anyways, those types of items are paid out of the operations account. They're not a capital item.
All right. I was just wondering if that was a coincidence or not. Yeah.
No.
And that water main leak was a valve that was leaking. The bolts on the valve had deteriorated. Those were replaced. That was in a newer part of Reed Street. Actually happened toward the north end of Reed Street. The Reed Street project that's on the capital plan is between Franklin and Fargo.
Yep.
Okay.
Near Memorial Park.
Okay.
And I believe there was a patch just put in there this week to repair a sinkhole caused by the sewer main that Steve mentioned, that the street was starting to disappear.
It's starting
Some
to
of the
flow
issues
into the
with-
sanitary sewer line.
So the emergency repairs are expenses because we just can't predict them.
Yeah,
So
and
so capital is different because we know what we need to do. But so I think that's what John was asking about. So
Yeah.
capital, how much, we know we have to do it, but emergency repairs, we don't, they're not predicted, so they're just treated as an expense.
as an operational expense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So just a follow on there. So, myself being appointed by the town, I obviously, my top focus is what's happening in the town, especially from the electric and sewage parts of the public works. And I see nothing there at all that I recognize happening in any area of the town. How's the town doing? And I see these are projects planned out for 6 years, especially for sewer and electric. What, no plans for anything there coming up in the town?
We've pretty much replaced all the electric in the town that would be considered a primary. So in the last 5 years, we've done just about every project that we had recommended out there. Sanitary sewer is based on a manifold construction that starts at which lift station is it, Bill? There by the Lake Mills Market.
That'd be lift station 13.
And then it starts there and then runs up to County Highway B, and then the next lift station is down at the bottom of the hill by Tyranina Park, and then it runs out to near Echo Bay.
Correct.
And essentially in the town, there are about 13 lift stations.
Bit less. There's 17, going to be 18 overall.
Yeah, but they're not all in the town.
No,
And John, they're in a daisy chain right now. So let's say there are 10 out there. Lift station number 10 pumps into lift station number 9. Number 9 pumps into 8. 8 pumps into 7. And so the flows in those build up, and the flow coming out of 10 that's going into 9 and then into 8 tends to get what we call sour, and they start to stink and other things. So the primary goal is to put in a manifold. There are a couple issues with the manifold. We have designed it, or at least conceptually designed it. We've done some work on going from 13 to the next lift station. But there's a lot of items in that area. The county just redid the roadway, and all that construction in that area is some of the youngest sanitary sewer in the area. So while it was done in the 70s and 80s, most of what we're looking at was done in 1910, 1920.
Sure. Yeah, that understandable. Yeah. We can move on. You've answered my questions. I don't want to slow things down.
But that's pretty consistent throughout the street projects. They involve water, sewer, storm. The ones along like College and Fremont and Lake Street, they involve a little bit different of, how should I say it? They involve a bigger issue of stormwater treatment. A lot of those run to the lake, and right now at the end of each street, they just dump out at the street end into the lake without any treatment at all. And what we're going to look at is some kind of pulling them together in a group and using some kind of treatment system. I don't know how many we can pull together and what kind of treatment systems, but each one of those treatment systems requires a certain amount of maintenance, because what you have to do is go in and vac them out. But they are designed to dump clearer water into the lake than what's currently going. And with the improvements that we're making, I don't know if more water will make it to the lake or not. Right now, there's so little stormwater drainage, I don't know where the water actually goes. To me, it looks like it's penetrating the pavement. But that's something that we're going to have to work out over the next couple of years as we do these streets in that area. One of the other projects that we got going this year in the wastewater treatment plant is borderline maintenance, and that's the oxidation ditch. And Bill, do you want to explain what that work is?
Yeah. What we'll be doing is draining one oxidation ditch at a time, then we have to dry it out. And then we get a contractor to lift a skid loader in there with a big excavator. We pile up all the debris. It has to be sampled, make sure that what's in it, passes muster, and then we truck it off to a landfill. And so that's what's going on. We're cleaning out the oxidation ditches, which is a process we do every 5 to 10 years. And we're coming up on about 7, so it's time to do it.
Was there some patching or something involved also?
Of the oxidation ditches?
Yeah, I thought that's what I read in the description.
I don't believe so in that. We drain the ditches, we scoop out the debris. I mean, if we find something wrong, obviously, we fix it at that point, but as far as the oxidation ditches go, as far as I know, we're just gonna be cleaning them.
Oh, it said
There has
rehabil-
to be shotcrete.
rehabilitated with a combination of replaced concrete panels and a sprayed layer of concrete known as shotcrete.
For the oxidation ditches?
Yes.
Yeah, I put that in there, Bill. I didn't know what was going on at the time, and so all Paul told me was is we needed the oxidation ditches in, and I didn't know why. So that's why I asked you now.
Gotcha.
I'll clean that up.
Way to go, Bill. No, in a good way. I mean, seriously, you got it in.
I know the last time we did it, we did some work on the ditches,
Yep,
sealing the cracks and
yep, that's correct.
fixing the concrete.
And we will look at that again, but I'm hoping that all we have to do is drain them down and clean them. It's quite expensive because of the sheer amount of material we're removing and the fact that we have to pay to tip it at the landfill.
What is the material?
It's primarily it's the grit that gets into our system from all the construction and all the leaky pipes, like you were talking about Reed Street being swallowed up. All those things work their way into the treatment plant, and we have no primary grit removal. So our grit removal is in the oxidation ditches. So every few years we have to clean that out. Otherwise, we lose a lot of the mixing that should be taking place in the oxidation ditch, and the solids settle, and we have problems with our controlling our operation. Then I guess would be the best way to put it. So the stuff that's in there has to be tested for metals and so on, and treated a lot like our sludge. And the landfill obviously wants to know what's in it, and then they want to bill us.
Steve, can you talk a little bit about the large equipment replacement? Is there a schedule there that we didn't have before, that we're doing it on a more periodic basis?
Yes, we have developed a schedule. We kind of pulled a package out of fleet equipment that gave schedules for replacement. Some of the items have moved up and down the list. The wheel loader moved up. The backhoe was in this year, actually was in last year, and we backed it off to this year. But all those items are on a replacement schedule. Like our wheel loaders are almost 20 years old. In fact, they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because we bought them used, and they bought them either just before or just after I got here. So they're at least 20 years old. The backhoe is pretty close to 20 years old. The chippers are not, but they go pretty fast. Skid steers, we've only purchased one since I've been here. Snow patrols, we have that they need a schedule on. If you go down and look at the ones we bought, I don't know if you remember, in 2002, we bought a set of the, I think 3 or 4 of them from Janesville. We still have them. They looked relatively new when we bought them used from Janesville. They now look like they are going to the rust bucket. So we have a number of those types of vehicles we need to change out. We try and change out the heavier equipment at 15 years and some of the lighter equipment at 7.5. So you may see lawnmowers in the 7.5 to 10, depending on their use and their size. You'll see generally backhoes and wheel loaders in that 15 to 20 year category. Snow plows, 12 to 15 years. So that's kind of the schedule we try and use. But we also look at their condition and evaluate it on an annual basis.
So it's not just a set schedule. You also look at the condition of the equipment and extend it or pull it in.
Yep. So
All right.
that's why the backhoe moved off a year, why the wheel loaders moved up a year. Some snow patrols moved down a couple years. we try and keep the amount that we're spending at a relatively flat amount, but we also try and look at, you know, what kind of condition the equipment is in. James does a pretty good job of keeping our stuff running. He has done a pretty good job of rebuilding some of our equipment. So look at the leaf vac. It's scheduled out for 25. We've had that leaf vac now for almost 20 years. So yeah, if you consider how much abuse a leaf vac takes in keeping it up and running for 20 years, it's pretty amazing. And we've taken old fire trucks. You know, they're no longer good for fire trucks, but we use them for all kinds of things. And James rebuilds them and puts beds on them. And so we've been able to use material haulers that we've been able to extend out or those types of things. So we're pretty ingenuitive. We try and do the best we can with what we have and continue to use what we have and make it, you know, make it work and give ourselves as much opportunity to continue functioning at a high level without spending a lot of new money.
Is there anything else, Steve, you want to cover on this summary report or this topic before we have other questions?
I don't think so. The only one I want to note is that water utility has finally started to break even. And so we've had several trucks that other utilities have had that they've passed down to the water utility that are now well past their life. So we've added a water, there's a truck that's been added into that water utility one. Electric generally just has a operational line item for trucks in this size category, but water has been so tight that this is an item that we watch a little bit closer in that utility. Other than that, I don't have anything else unless you guys have any questions.
Well, the electric bucket trucks are expensive, right?
They are very expensive, and we generally put those in the budget. But we just purchased 2, I think. And so we should be good for at least, 12 to 15 years.
Okay.
The pole truck might come up again sooner than that. That's a little bit different than a bucket truck. But other than that, I don't see anything else coming up significant in the utility that would have hit that level.
Anyone have any questions on or further discussion on the capital budget?
In the TID section, I know what's going on with Jefferson Street, but Topos is like 950,000. So what is that exactly? Is that paying for then? A new street?
No, it's actually paying for stormwater, water, and sewer.
I thought, yeah.
And Todd, that breaks out into a couple different categories that are hard to read here, but $250,000 of it is a state grant.
Okay.
So we're looking at about between 700 and 750. The way it works is that we evaluate what their assessed value will contribute, and then they get a portion of their increment back to use for items that would qualify in the TID project plan. So like environmental cleanup, stormwater, water, sewer, electric, environmental cleanup, which I'm sure that site will have some environmental cleanup, some design and engineering work, those all qualify. So our initial expectation is they'll get somewhere between, this one is an important project to us, Todd.
Yeah, I know.
And so we're looking at contributing more money to it than we would normally. Most of them, we're looking at about 50% of their increment. We're probably going to push this one as close to 100% as we can confidently do. Again, it's a pay-go, so We make them sign a developer's agreement that says if their increment doesn't cover it, they have to pay the difference. So that's kind of the situation. That the other one in the TID is 1204 and 1117 South Main Street. They're putting in about, what was it, $2.5–3 million worth of new buildings, and they're basically looking at water and sewer extensions and contributions, so, and stormwater.
What's Kate's on? I've never heard that before.
That's Forest Landscaping. Is the it's an holding LLC, but this is actually a joint venture with Moulet Project Management and Forest Construction.
And it's 1204 South Main Street, and then across the street, 1117 South Main and 113 Sandy Beach Road.
Oh, the former restaurant that burnt down, that area?
Yep.
On the corner, yep. You got it.
I don't have any more questions.
There's another potential TID project that's smaller than these two, but there is another one out there. And we might be looking at phase 7 of Brookstone. The contractor says he'll have it built out by the end of he'll have phase 6 built out by the end of next year. And based on what he's done so far this year, he's pretty accurate. He's had the best year ever in his construction life.
I have a question on sidewalks on Tyranina Road. There's been discussion about that, but I don't see anything in the plans here.
We filed. Did you read the article in the newspaper about the town project out by Crossman Road?
Yeah, I read that too.
We filed under a similar program that was created by that line item veto. So I'm not sure that we'll get that money. And even if it wasn't included in that portion of the line item veto, we filed for a grant. I don't know how high up the list will qualify. But have you heard anything, Brandon? Your mic is off.
Thank you. The TAP grant?
Yes.
No, I haven't heard back. I can check in with them though.
Yeah, that would be a grant. If that comes, if I find out anything about that, I'll throw that in. But that didn't require a lot of city contribution. That was pretty small. They were paying for a large portion of that. That's same with the Brookstone Phase 7 actually doesn't end up in the Public Works budget. You'll see it because it's a preliminary and a final plat, but that actually goes through special assessment under the same conditions we did last time. So in the developer's agreement, he's waived all the special assessment requirements so that we can go ahead and build the project, and he will pay his special assessments as billed. He's already paid substantially more this year than what was required to be paid by the loan. So it's looks like he'll be paying about $180,000 this year and probably $300,000 next year. So his repayment schedule is pretty fast, because what we require is that when a lot sells, he has to pay his assessment. It's not built out over although he's given 10 years, the second that lot sells, he has to pay that assessment. So we get generally 35 below, well, we actually get $37,000 per lot, but 1,700 of it is electric. The rest goes towards a special assessment. So it's worked out pretty well. I don't know, you'll probably see it come up this year, but our equalized assessed value went from 600,000 to 600 million to 639 million. So all those ratios that we have, like, the debt ratio was at like 74%. It's now down to 64%. the new debt in there. So there are some items that I still have to add in. So we'll find out where we're at. But there's a combination of, based on our financial plans, of running shorter debt schedules. So even though we're running a higher debt up front, we get off faster. So it brings it's starting to pull our overall debt down more. And then the growth in the assessed valuation in combination with all the new projects that we've been stimulating through TID has generated a substantial amount of income. So some of the debt, instead, you don't pay by, it goes against our general obligation debt and our debt balance, but it's paid through special assessment, so it doesn't go on the levy. So like phases 6 and 7 of Brookstone, that's not on the levy. And all the TID dollars, while it's on the levy is only against, we use the revenues from the increment of that TID to pay that. So it doesn't go on the general levy. It only goes against the TID levy. And the only property that's paying that levy is the one that's in the TID. So if you looked at it and you said, well, we accumulated $700,000 worth of debt to do Tyrannina Point, but Tyrannina Point is actually generating that payment. So payment is probably, I'm trying to remember, it's like $80,000 a year. And they're paying that to their increment off the TID. So it doesn't actually impact anybody but that property owner.
So Steve, this is a capital plan here. It's not really, we see the capital budget later on in the year, right?
Yes.
So as far as the capital plan is concerned, the funding source should, regardless of the funding source, I think the Public Works Board should have visibility of the capital expenditures, whether it's a sidewalk paid by grant or improvements paid by TID. And as an example, the TID, some of that, many of those improvements, it sounds like, don't have anything to do really with public improvements, like soil soil remediation for things that are in the soil that shouldn't be there. But if there's things like sewer and water, or all the stuff that's going down on the south end of town right now this year, it'd be nice if the Public Works Board had visibility of the public capital improvement projects related to the Public Works Board, regardless of the funding source.
Yeah, and I put them in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're in.
Yeah, but like Kason, it's $300,000. We don't know how much of that is public infrastructure improvement that's going to be taken over by the electric utility, the water utility, or the streets department, or the sewer utility.
And that's a good question, and I don't know yet.
Right. Same for the other two.
Right. They are in design, and as soon as I know what those designs are, they'll be coming out. But at this point in time, I can only give you an estimate.
But you give estimates for all the other streets 5 years out.
And
those aren't designed yet.
Yeah, but I don't have any idea what they're looking at. I know what a street rebuild is. I don't have any idea of what they're going to look at here. They design their own plans, and then they submit them to me, and I have to react to that. It's not like I get to say, okay, I'm replacing existing 300 feet of water main.
Okay.
So I don't, it's just better for me to give a flat estimate of what I think they're going to do. What's their, based on history, they could ask for, up to $600,000 worth of increment. Do I think they have enough project-worthy projects? Do they have project plan So the TID project plan defines what they can spend dollars on. Do I think they have enough items that within that category that they could spend that whole amount? No, I'm thinking maybe 300,000. So yes, there's some water and sewer extensions, but we've been debating with them on how they're going to do that. We've been debating how the stormwater works. And so it's just easier for me to do a flat one than try and tell you right now, this is what's going to happen. And that doesn't happen at all. Whereas
so you don't know what the city is doing there next year. Is that correct?
In the TID?
Yeah.
We're not doing anything.
Then it shouldn't be in 2021, should it?
Yeah, it should, because what happens is the developer builds it in a TID, and then we reimburse him.
With the increment.
Yeah, so the developer is building it in 2021, and we don't know what they're building yet.
Not yet.
They're going through design on the projects that are listed right now. We literally haven't seen any final project whatsoever.
They're not like us, Mark. They can spit it out in a month or two. They don't work on it from July until December. So they bring in their engineer, and he's starting to work on it. Once they feel comfortable with it, they send it to us, and then we start working on it. And there's a combination of items that we do. We generally sit down and go through the site plan and tell them what we think will work and what won't. And then we generally negotiate through that. And then they complete a developer's agreement, which says what we're willing to pay for and what we're not willing to pay for, and what they have to build in order to do that, and how they're going to guarantee.
Let's take Topels here for as an example. It's on a street that's just been rebuilt.
Yep.
So what public infrastructure, just even hypothetically, I mean, I'm not looking for any details even, just it's on a rebuilt street. What public infrastructure cap that one of our utilities or the street department would take over could be in that TID?
Probably the stormwater. But so you just want to know, because there are other things that the TID would pay for other than public utilities. You just want to know what the utility ones are.
In the street, the parts that the Public Works Board is responsible for.
Well, you're responsible for stormwater.
I know.
And so whether it's in the street or on there, so I would say stormwater is probably the only one. But I put it in here just because I wanted to have an idea, and I don't have any idea what their stormwater is going to cost.
But it's not going to be 950, right?
Right.
Okay.
But I put the total amount in there for total transparency, so you guys know what's going on. Some of it's going to be for demolition, some of it's going to be for environmental, some of it's going to be for stormwater, some of it's going to be for design engineering. What ends up being the streets department portion of it or the utilities portion, I can't guarantee you right now because I haven't seen what they're proposing.
Okay. So it's not real transparent when it's a big black box, You know what I mean?
I get that, but I can only give you what I've got, Mark.
Okay. Well, putting a 950 number on there you might as well put 0 on there. The zero may be closer to the 950 as far as what public capital improvements are.
And you could be correct. But I know that Todd has historically wanted to see the TID projects listed somehow. And, I could have left them out. But, at least at this point, you guys have an idea and you've debated, hey, there are some potential items in there that could be related to public works.
And I
can't guarantee.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee. Yeah. I can't guarantee you exactly how much right now, but at least with the Caisson ones, those are probably going to come through as preliminary and final plats in some form or fashion. Topals, that'll come through as a developer's agreement. Brookstone will definitely come through as a preliminary and final plat. So you guys get a feel for what's coming forward and what to look forward to. And then you can ask those types of questions again. Well, what did we actually get out of this?
Well, would it actually come before the Public Works Board again?
Well, at least the one site 1204, I'm pretty sure will, because it's the way they're going to have to design it is going to be done as a PDD. And so it'll have like a preliminary and a final plat. And those all go before the Public Works Board, because you'll get to see the public improvements in there, the water, the sewer, the storm sewer.
Okay. So, and besides the TIDs, the other thing that I mentioned was the Tyranina sidewalk, which is quote unquote in the plans, but when it's going to get funded is obviously up in the air, but it really is part of the plan right now, isn't it?
I would say I haven't thought about it at all until I actually see something in writing from them, and probably would it be in next season's construction? Might not, because we might be able to delay it until 22.
Yeah, this plan you have this plan going out to 2026. Shouldn't it be on there somewhere?
I'm willing to put it on there. I just it's so iffy that I didn't feel confident in putting it in there. If I had something from them saying, yeah, we're starting to, you were in the top 10, I would have said, okay, I'll put it in there, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, I understand. What I would suggest would be to put it in there at some year and say, hey, I don't know when this is going to occur, but I just put it in here as this year as a placeholder.
Yeah, I can do that. It would be nice if they did it next year.
And we've done some engineering work on it already, right?
We have done some, mainly measurements and calculations.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've done actual surveying and designing.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's all I had on this. Anybody else have anything on capital improvement plan?
No.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve it. If we don't have any other people wanting to discuss it, we'll call a roll.
Mr. Lair,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Mr. Reich,
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Mr. Pickard.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Next on the agenda is item 9, discussion recommendation on street maintenance budget. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the prepared one 20-8-3.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion and second to approve. I'm guessing, Dwayne, you're gonna would like to go through this with us?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start, we can start with either document, but let's start with the spreadsheet. I'll just explain what the spreadsheet is. You've seen this before in previous years. This is a list only of a portion of the PACER ratings that have two criteria. They are streets that are rated, remember, let's review. Our streets are rated from 1 to 10, 10 being a brand new street, 1 being one that's falling apart, and everything in between. Each number represents a potential maintenance activity that we would do. And those range from a chip seal that is going to cost about $2 a square yard to a mill and overlay that's in the range of $20 a square yard to a pulverization that's in the ballpark of 40. And when I say ballpark, I'm saying some streets have curb and gutter replacement, some streets have more patching that's required. So we're talking about a range as we're talking about this spreadsheet. And then, of course, if we're looking at a full reconstruction, we're talking about more than $100 a square yard. So, of course, we've talked about this maintenance plan in the past, that it makes sense to continue to do maintenance on a 7-year interval so that we can maintain our streets at a higher level at a lower cost than just waiting until they completely collapse and then restore or reconstruct them. Now, what we're doing is combining a number of different things, the capital improvement plan that we just talked about, as well as the streets that are in deteriorated condition, as well as streets that are up for their 7-year maintenance plan. So that's what this spreadsheet does. In the top third of the spreadsheet, you'll see streets that we just talked about. And so, for example, the top two are Reed Street and Lake Street, West Lake Street. And you'll note in the middle of the spreadsheet, there's a date associated with the CIP. You'll note that some of those streets, in particular this year, Church Street, is the street that probably we will look to do some kind of maintenance effort on it. We realize we're probably going to be doing maintenance on top of something that has old infrastructure under it, but we still are in the design process with Strand on the West Lake Street project and what limits of that project will end on Church Street, and then whether or not we should do some kind of maintenance on Church Street north to Campus Street, for example. And so as you head down in that first third, you can see that we've lumped a number of other streets with the capital improvement plan. For example, the Prospect Street in 2025. There's a number of streets there that are related. They're in the general area. We're probably going to do a large storm sewer project associated with that in that year, tying into the Mulberry storm sewer that was constructed last year. So you can see we've pulled some of the lower rated streets up into the capital improvement plan in that upper third. Then I'm going to move to the second third of streets between the two solid lines. Those are generally streets that are rated above 4, but they are due for their approximate 7-year maintenance. And most of those in those cases, some of them are even actually relatively new. You would say, well, Catlin Drive, we just built that and reconstructed that in 2014, but it is on the 7-year schedule, which would say that we should be looking at a chip seal to seal any of the cracks that are starting to occur on that street. Then we move into the lower third of this spreadsheet, and these are the ones that haven't even made it to the CIP, have not made it to the maintenance program yet, and we start trying to make those tough decisions that Steve talked about earlier. Even throughout this, we're making tough decisions on maintenance where we're trying to maintain the street surface, but balancing that with infrastructure that's pretty old. For example, we talked about Church Street. The water main in that area, as you'll see, is some of it's in the 1910s and some of it's in the 1950s. The issue, though, is if we're not going to put that street completely in the capital improvement plan, at some point we have to do something to maintain, to make it a viable street to stay together until a point where we can replace the sewer and water below. Get into some of those tough decisions. Go ahead.
Quick question. Are all the Pacer 2s, 3s, and 4s on this list, or are there other ones as well?
I should have clarified that earlier. Thanks for pointing that out. In the middle of the page, there's a Pacer rating column. And these are all of the 4s, the 1s through 4s, so the worst rated streets in the city. And it should be a list of all of them. Is there a street that you feel should be in this list that is not?
No.
Okay.
I just was clarifying.
That was a good question.
Yes. A great question. And yes, it is all of the 1s through 4s, and then anything above a 4 that is not been maintained in the last 7 years. So in a sense, this does show that we've been doing, I think, a very reasonable job of maintaining the streets, because it means we only have one page. I think a number of years ago, we had several pages in this category. While you still see the bottom third of the list is still not within this year's plan. And now I'll jump into what our recommendations are. If you see the column that is titled 2021 Maintenance Estimate Recommendations, and you'll see yellow highlighted dollar amount. We're taking those yellow highlighted dollar amounts from the 3 different maintenance options. First one being chip seal in the first column, second one being a mill and overlay in the second column, and the third one being a pulverization. And in this case, we're not proposing any pulverization in this year. We are looking at some mill and overlay, in particular on Mulberry Street. That would be Mulberry Street from Moss toward County Trunk Highway V. Note that while unfortunate, we will keep a block of Mulberry Street not maintained. And that's from the end of last year's project to Moss Street. And the reason for that is we'll be connecting to that storm sewer in 2025. And we're hoping that that block will be sufficient to make it through those 5-year period. Those decisions that we're talking about, if you recall, Steve, what was it, 2013, we did a chip seal on South Main Street, correct? To maintain the facility to make it until construction occurred this past year.
Mm-hmm.
We get into some of those decisions that we have to make that are difficult, like Church Street, where we have to actually do a maintenance plan on something that we know we have some infrastructure that we want to replace in the future, but the dollars are just not there on the utility side. In general, we're looking at a large amount of chip seal. We've got a couple of mill and overlay projects, and of course the projects that we talked about earlier. I think maybe now would be a good time to kind of move into the map that was included in your packet.
I've got a question before you do that.
Sure.
By focusing on the chip seal in the middle of the spreadsheet, you're basically keeping those streets from falling to the bottom third of your spreadsheet. Is that correct? So I'm reading the spreadsheet correctly?
That is correct. So the goal and discussions we've had, a good question. The goal that we've had in the past with this board is that those streets that are in that 5 to 8 range, and maybe I'll just go back, 10s are brand new, 9s are ones that we've done a mill and overlay, and then those 5s through 8s, those are ones that we want to try and do these maintenance to keep them from getting to 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. And for example, we can do a number of $2 a square yard chip seals every 7 years is much more cost effective than doing a $40 a square yard pulverization.
Got it.
Once every 20 years. And so there's where the huge cost savings is as far as addressing these in a timely manner and maintaining them. It's not to say that at some point, and even in our plan, we look to do chip seal once, maybe a chip seal a second time, but eventually we're going to have to get to a mill and overlay regardless. It's not that we can continue to do chip seals, but we evaluate that as they come up. In fact, I'll even say, while we're showing this to you today, the street department and I will also, and with Steve and with staff, will review this list again next spring after the number of freeze-thaw cycles that'll occur.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so while this list is what it is today, come March, it may look a little different. Or
Sure.
maybe some other street that unfortunately pops into this list that wasn't there as of right now.
Okay.
Historically, you would look at city maintenance as replacing a street about every 25 to 30 years. This new program looks at it being in the 50 to 70 year category. So if you do your oil and chips and your mill and overlays and your pulverizes at the right point in time, you can keep that pavement in good enough shape that it'll last a lot longer. And hopefully you're getting it to the same life cycle as the utilities underneath. So that
Okay.
your overall investment in that street is significantly less than what it would have been at a 25-year replacement.
And how many miles
Thank
of
you.
streets do we have, Steve or Dwayne?
I
Approximately.
should have had that number. I believe it's between
30.
32 and 35, depending on whether you count the county roads that run through the city as well.
Okay, thanks.
And is that lane miles or just straight miles?
That's straight miles. So lane miles would be double.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe to help explain and see the map better of what we're proposing in that last spreadsheet, we'll move to the map. Let's start with the green. We've already talked about the green reconstructions in the CIP plan and the TID discussion we had earlier. That's West Lake Street, that's Jefferson Street in the TID, and that's the sewer/water project on Reed Street in Fargo and Franklin. Those would be the total reconstruction. By the time we do all that sewer work and water work and stormwater work on some of those streets, it's a full reconstruction of the street. The blue areas are proposed mill and overlay. Again, as we coordinate with Strand on West Lake Street, we'll look at Church Street between Campus and Lake Street. We also are looking to mill and overlay and take Veterans Lane from where the DOT's project left off this past year and resurface that area around the fire station. The third area on the mill and overlay, as we talked about earlier, is north of Moss Street. Again, that's that gap from Moss Street to County Trunk Highway V. Again, a street that, as we looked at in the previous month, just doesn't, while it's coming up for chip seal, if you drive that street, you'll see that chip seal probably isn't going to hold it together, or probably have to go to some type of mill and overlay on that stretch at this point.
And Dwayne, you said that there was a segment of Mulberry just southwest of that that's not going to get this much maintenance?
So the proposal at this time is to hold, so this would be the area, if you recall last year, Mulberry Street ended just north of Grant Street.
Right.
And the intention in 2025, when Prospect Street is reconstructed, is that we will extend that storm sewer that went down the CP Avenue right away and drains from the Mulberry Street project. There is plans that sewer would then collect some of the water that comes off of Prospect Street when that street is reconstructed. The route for that storm sewer is likely from Prospect to Moss to Mulberry, and then Mulberry to the CP Avenue extended right-of-way location.
So if anybody wonders, gee, why did the city do all this nice work on Mulberry Street and leave one block not done? That's so silly. Why did they do that? It's to save money.
It is to save money. We will consider probably next spring.
It will come back.
Knowing that 5 years out.
It's not just to save money. It will get done.
Pardon?
I shouldn't just say it's to save money. It's to save money to complete it later and not tear up a new street.
Well, you bring up a good point. We may want to consider what we've done in the past, although we're only about 4 years away, whether or not we should do a chip seal on that block. But we'll evaluate that again in the spring, whether that's the right decision to make at that point. Moving on, then, as in red, those are the streets that are proposed to be chip seal. As you know, Catlin is relatively new. So is the portion of Pinnacle. I apologize. The Pinnacle, both of those streets were constructed in 2014. So this would be their first maintenance year. The other areas are generally streets that have been there some time. And in fact, College Street and O'Neill, I believe it was 7 years ago. Look at our spreadsheet. Those were also chip sealed in 2014. And so they are on that 7-year program. We did have some discussion about Madison and East Lake Street downtown around the Commons Park. We are looking at a chip seal at this point. And again, we'll continue to evaluate whether that chip seal program stays the same next spring. Any other questions on the spreadsheet or the map?
Nope. Nobody's got any questions for Dwayne?
The only question I was going to ask is the usual question of, we're doing a good job still with the mill and overlay, not the mill and overlay, the chip seal program. It's still doing what we were expecting it to do years ago when we started going down that path. It looks like it is, but I was just asking for your perspective too.
I do. For example, O'Neill Street, we had some discussion about that, but I think O'Neill Street probably can get through another 7 years with a chip seal again. As we just said, 2014 we did O'Neill Street. So it is holding up. It's sealing those cracks, and it's keeping the deterioration at a slower pace. I would say yes. I think we've improved the ratings throughout. I haven't gone through and recently done an average, but I probably should at some point for this board, and show what we've done from our pacer reading average from 2013 through 2020. I would think that there's a significant improvement.
No, you gave me what I was looking for. I was just looking for the warm and fuzzy that says, this is about right. We're still doing the same thing that we were planning on doing years ago, and it still is holding out the way we were expected to. That's all I was looking for.
I would say yes.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and second to approve in front of us. The street maintenance budget. Roll call, please.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Mr. Pickard,
Aye.
Mr. Lair.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay. Next on the agenda is item 10, discussion recommendation on wastewater treatment plant compliance maintenance annual report. And again, there's a prepared motion for us to use if we would like.
I'll make a motion to approve motion 20-8-4.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. And Bill, would you like to go over this a little bit with us, please?
Yeah, certainly. The Wisconsin Admin Code NR 208 requires all publicly owned treatment works to submit the compliance maintenance annual report each year. The deadline for that submission is June 30th. However, this year that's been extended due to the pandemic, so no worries, we made it. It's August 31st this year. It gives the purpose of the report is it gives us and the DNR a way to evaluate our permit compliance and how we're doing in the collection system as well as the treatment plant. This year the report is 29 pages long, including the grading summary and the resolution page. And as always, the report's divided into 10 sections. Each of the 10 sections is graded on the summary page, and this year, as I'm sure you know or you've seen, we received 9 A's and we have 1 C, giving us a 3.84 GPA out of a possible 4.0. In 2018, we had a 4.0, but in comparison, this report's almost exactly like our 2015 report. So 3.84 is still pretty good. I guess I'll touch on each section if you'd like, and briefly, and tell you what I noticed. So I'll start with section 1. We'll jump right into that. The influent flow and loading. If you take a look at page 1 of the report, you can see in the middle of the first page that our design BOD is 1,856 pounds per day. And the DNR uses 90% of that as a benchmark for grading. So 1,670.4 pounds per day of influent BOD. And we exceeded that 90% 7 times. We exceeded 100% 2 times. So if you look at the bottom of the page, that's what brought this section down to a C, which means that we're required to give a response to the DNR. And I've taken the liberty to basically type a brief response on the resolution page. But what I've told them is that, you can see it there, is that we're working with our design engineer on facility planning to address it, basically, to address the loadings coming into the plant. We're also, I guess, we're also going to be checking out some of the industries. We continue to work with them, but that's really, I don't have a lot of control over what's coming in, other than working with industries. And the strength of the waste, I guess, is what caused that C grade. But if there's no questions on that, I'll move to section 2.
I just have a question. I just noticed that the BOD loading is higher in the January through July months than it is in the August through December months. Do you have any idea why that is?
No, I saw that too. The first 7 months, and if you look, the flows were relatively even all year. So a lot of times in the spring we'll see, surges in flows, but the flows throughout the year were fairly even. May was a little higher, but March was a little higher, but and that calculates in with the BOD to make the pounds per day loading, as I'm sure you've figured. But that January, that 305 that's really high. A normal influent BOD would be in the range of less than 250. So we'll say 180 to 250 would be normal. 200, 220. These are a little high. And I'm still seeing some high solids and BODs coming in. So I think we're going to have to double down and take another look at some of the industries and what might be happening.
Bill, could you refresh me? What does BOD mean?
It's the biochemical oxygen demand, or the organic strength of the wastewater.
Okay.
The only thing I was going to keep harping on was if we're more convinced that it's heading down the industrial or commercial user standpoint versus the residential side, keep working with those guys. But if they don't start responding and working with you to get some collaboration at the very least, I just don't shy away from using some big guns that involve dollars. Just because if they're causing things that cause additional work and additional dollars to be put into the system in order to address it, and we're more inclined to say that they're coming from commercial and industrial users than residential, which I believe that's correct, or from infrastructure in general, then if you're not getting what you need from trying to do collaboratively, financial always can motivate people too. So just don't be afraid to use that.
I think one of the things is that it's there's a cost in trying to determine who it is, when it's happening. We do require them to do testing, but effectively we'd have to try to anticipate who it is and go out and do a lot of sampling of their facility and hope that we caught that, and then we could say, hey, we had a high loading and you gave us a high loading, you know, so you have to be able to prove it, then just have a suspicion, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of these BODs don't look necessarily like they're totally domestic.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions on that first section? Okay, then we'll move on to section 2. That'll be effluent BOD. And we had no exceedances here of our monthly limits, but we are still experiencing some ongoing pH spikes. We have some process foaming, and some other little things that likely related to industry again. And we are still working with those industries to reduce these things. Some of them have spent a pretty good deal of money updating their facilities and trying to help us out. So we'll continue to work with them, but we didn't have any grading issues here. We got an A in that section. So if there's no questions, I'll move on to section 3. Effluent total suspended solids. Again, I saw really nothing here. As far as the effluent goes, the plant performed well. We had no issues. I am seeing some high influent suspended solids as well. And there's a design limit on that too, but the DNR doesn't evaluate it in this report. So those are things that the design engineer will look at in the facility planning stages, and we'll try to iron them out there. Section 4, effluent ammonia, no issues here either. So there's really nothing to talk about. It looks good. Section 5, same thing. I guess that's effluent phosphorus, and one thing to consider there is that in the future, we're going to have some really strict limits. And so that kind of was another catalyst for us looking at facility planning, is that we're going to have to comply with some strict effluent phosphorus limits, and that may require a plant expansion and some other things. So just something to be aware of.
Has there been any talk about when they're going to enforce or do that increased or reduced phosphorus limit?
Yeah, we're actually on a compliance schedule. I'll have to look at my permit. There's benchmarks to hit every year. On the top of my head, I don't know. We have another permit coming up. I think I'll have to look at when our permit expires, but I think we got a couple years, but then it's going to be due. We're working with our engineer, so it's
Okay.
So that brings us to section 6, biosolids. We got an A here as well, so we really had no grading issues. I guess I will bring up that the biosolids continues to be an issue with the weather patterns we have now and so on. As far as getting them out, we have a really small window. It has to be useful to the farmer. He doesn't like soil compaction. He doesn't like us adding moisture to his fields in the spring if it's raining. We can't get out in them. So that's just always an issue. And with biosolids relating to phosphorus, if we have lower phosphorus limits, we'll be generating more solids. So we may have to look at a little more storage on site. Would possibly be a good idea if we do expand.
So last year we weren't able to use the farmers we normally use.
We were, well, yes and no. We have a lot of land. If you look at what it shows, we have 456 acres or something ridiculous. But what happens is some of that land has never been gone on since I've been here. Once it's in our system, the DNR doesn't mind if we hold it, because then they kind of know where it is and that no one else is going on it. So some of it, unless somebody else requests or the farmer says, I don't want you to have that in your stockpile, basically, then they remove it. I guess I could tell the DNR I wanted to shed some of it, but it just doesn't seem like there's a reason to get rid of it. As long as it's under our name, we can keep it there. And if anybody ever says, hey, could you go on my field, and we find out, oh yeah, it's already approved, then we just have to go back and jump through some hoops with the DNR to be able to go on it again, because we haven't used it in so long. But we've got considerably less land to go on than what that shows. And we dealt with our normal farmers more or less, but we procured some new fields from him, and that all, it just takes time. It's just a hassle every year.
Okay.
You know, it's a big rush. It's like farming. 'Cause
Yeah.
they want to get their crops on, and we've got to schedule a hauler. And so anyway, moving on to section 7, staffing. And I guess we got an A here. I do see some staffing issues, as I kind of segued last year, in the future coming along, as we add more miles of sewer to maintain and more pump stations and more equipment and future plant expansions. Regulating and testing and stuff will be probably at some point we'll need to add some staffing. Any questions there? No? Section 8 is operator certification. I'm certified to run the plant. We have no issues. We've got a couple other operators that also hold most of the licenses. So Lake Mills is in pretty good shape there. Nothing to worry about. Section 9 is financial management. And to be honest with you, Betsy takes care of this section for me. She must be doing a good job because we always get an A. So nothing to worry about there. And that brings us to the last section, section 10, is a sanitary sewer and collection system. And this addresses our backups and spills and our maintenance of the collection system. 2019 was the year we had no broken force mains, so that was nice. We didn't have any spills out in the collection system, although we did have one reportable spill that they count in this section because that's just where they count the spills. It was a sludge storage tank that foamed over within our facility. About 50 gallons of sludge foam came out of the top of the tank, went on the ground. We saw it immediately. It was sucked up. We washed the area down and cleaned it up with our big vac truck and started trying to move that foaming sludge that was working. We don't know why. That's something that's new within the last less than 10 years. That sometimes these tanks foam. We moved that into another tank, drew that tank that was foaming down, added some anti-foam agent to it that's supposed to help with the foaming issue, and that seemed to resolve it. As far as our collection system goes, we had about 19 complaints, 5 sewer backups. We achieved most of our collection system goals with the exception of 2. I guess their goals, if I blew them all out of the water every year, then I should raise them. But the two we didn't pass, didn't quite make, were we fell short a little bit on our televising this year and our manholes inspections, but I'm not horribly worried about that at this point. Some years we do better in one section and a little worse in others, but it kind of all evens out. So in conclusion, I guess 2019 was a fairly average year for us operation-wise. Not anything really stands out. And I guess what I'm looking for is you guys to make a recommendation to the council so that they can get a resolution. We can put this year behind us.
All right. Any questions for Bill? Nope. I don't have any either, so we have, again, a motion to approve the compliance maintenance report on the table. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Reich,
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Mr. Pickard,
Aye.
Mr. Lair,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
Okay.
Nice work, Bill.
Yes. Nice job running the plant.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is 11, recommendation for future agenda items. Anything to discuss here?
Has there been movement on finding land for the proposed yard waste facility? Is that even close to coming back to Public Works Board or no?
I wish that it were.
Okay.
We put a substantial amount of time into it. I won't say we have killed ourselves, but we have looked, we have made some inquiries. We have evaluated a lot of areas. I will tell you that every meeting that I have, one of the items that I note is that we need to get a site because our current one is becoming problematic. And so I'm working hard on it, but real estate is a really tough issue in this area.
People started to dump fish down there now.
So, is there anything moving on at the county level for shares composting?
That I would say that probably did not move forward.
That's too bad.
They are still evaluating which ones they want to do at the county level. The only one that I know that's moved substantially forward is EMS. But the rest of them there were a group of them that were listed as having high potential, but they are kind of at that, let's see what happens with the EMS and where we're moving forward from that. It was noted that Public Works already is a very collaborative group countywide, and that a lot was done across all the areas with all the municipalities and the county. It's just that fire and EMS were noted as highly territorial and not wanting to. So.
Anything else?
I do believe we're going to have another pole attachment issue coming forward, Dan. Is that right? Your mic.
Dan,
Yeah. The entire situation needs to be kind of further established, but then we have to address rates and just how comprehensive the 5G ordinance ends up being. I contemplate it to include basically other pole attachments as well, so we'll see where that goes.
as you mentioned earlier in the meeting, the legislature, the state legislator in that language says that we have to be fair to roll out not only 5G, but other companies. So we need to have a comprehensive
Correct.
permit process for all customers to come through that pole attachment.
On another subject, I saw some discussion or read about some discussion at the city council about recycling and garbage. And I believe that's something that also falls under Public Works Board, correct?
It does probably. I have prepared, we have the new contract proposal from John's.
John's.
And I have written a RFP that Dan is reviewing. I think Dwayne already has, but I know Dan is at least reviewing it. And that will probably come as a package so that if we decide not to do John's, again, renew their contract, we have a RFP that's ready to go out. Historically, that's been the problem is that, you know, the contract from John's was like a 5-year deal. And then at the end of the 5 years, they would make a proposal that the council would generally accept. And so I didn't have to ever prepare an RFP. So the last RFP was done somewhere around 97, and it was pretty basic. So I've written a new one. I think it's less than 50 pages, right, Dan?
It's right around there.
You have a way
You
with,
said Dwayne's already through it, huh?
Steve, you have a way with words.
First time.
Well, there are a lot of issues that you have to kind of hammer out with this, you know, when there's some that we've taken advantage of for a long time with John's because they've already had it all in place. But now that if you're opening it up to other ones, you have to make sure that they have those types of operations and facilities and practices in place. And because, you know, if you write a one pager and you throw it out there and then you get somebody who is out there with a old pickup truck throwing it in the back of his truck kind of every day of the week, it's not quite what we were anticipating. So it does look at the size of the containers, and it does address bulk pickup issues and electronic pickup issues, and throws a lot of alternatives in there so that we can weigh and evaluate the additional costs of each type of collection process that's involved. But it basically sticks to the single stream recycling and the single truck, single arm collection that we currently have.
But there's some alternatives on frequency and other types of extra services that we can get quotes on and evaluate yea or nay on.
Yep. One of them is like recycling. We do currently every 2 weeks.
Mhm.
It does provide an alternative to bid every week. It also provides an alternative for different size containers. So if a property owner wanted to have a smaller container or a larger container, they could have that done. And they have to notify the company, because if there's an additional cost to that, then the company has to pass it on to us, and we have to pass it on to that, because everything's fee-based. Now, some of it won't be done that way, like the bulk pickup will be done in one form citywide, and electronic would be done in one form citywide. There aren't as many options to those. But there are some options available to each individual property owner that they could make certain types of selections, but then they have to work that out with the hauler, and the hauler has to provide adequate billing notice to the city on how that works.
Okay. Anything else for future agenda items? Okay. Oh, no. All right. If nothing else, then I guess I will declare the meeting adjourned.